Guys, so we are back with another video and we are just going to be jumping into part 2 of episode 4. You guys, just as a reminder, please try to keep it positive in the comments. Let's have some healthy dialogues, and if I miss anything in this video, please do not hesitate to let me know, correct me in the comments, so forth and so on. So as just a refresher for you guys, this is the AJ Armstrong case, and he was actually accused of killing his parents, Antonio and Dawn Armstrong, at just the age of 16 years old. Now, this incident occurred July 2016, and when I say this case is it's so much twist and turn in this case. So if you guys have not seen part 1, definitely go check it out. I am going to go ahead and link it down in the description box below. So for the beginning of this video, I am just going to go ahead and break down who is who during the trial. And I am also going to go ahead and give a timeline breakdown of the trial as well. So without further ado, let's just jump right into this video. So now we know who AJ is. Let's move on to his siblings. So Kiera Armstrong is his sister, and obviously Dawn and Antonio's daughter. And at the time of this incident, she had been about 12 years young. And Josh is Dawn's bio son, and he was also adopted by Antonio Sr., but nevertheless his son. Kay Winston, who is mentioned a lot in part 1 and will also take the stand in part 2, she is Antonio Sr.'s mother, so she is AJ's paternal grandmother. And the prosecutors on this case were Chris Jordan of Harris County and Ryan Trask. I really hope I pronounced his last name correctly. So the defense team on this case had been Rick DeToto, Chris Collins, and J.L. Carpenter. And the judge on this case had been Kelly Johnson. And Kelly Johnson is a part of the 178th District, and she had been a judge since 2017, I believe. So we are now going to go ahead and move on to the timeline of this trial. So we know back in July of 2016, the brutal murders of Dawn and Antonio Sr. occurred. In March of 2017, a judge certifies AJ, who at the time was 17 years old, as an adult in the killings of his parents. And I mentioned that in part 1 as well. In April of 2017, a judge sets AJ's bond to $200,000. Soon after, AJ is released from police custody. And at this point in time, AJ is actually wearing an ankle monitor, and he goes on to wear the ankle monitor throughout the entire trial. March of 2019 is when his murder trial officially begins. So his murder trial goes on for about a month, and the judge had to go ahead and declare a mistrial because the jurors just could not come to a verdict. So 3 years and 6 months later, AJ, who is now a newly father to a little boy, he goes on to start his second murder trial. Just a few weeks later after this, though, a mistrial is declared once again because the jurors again could not come to an agreement of the verdict. Now, in May of 2023, jury selection begins for the third trial, and over the course of 3 weeks, dozens of jurors were interviewed. This process took the attorneys over 150 hours to complete, so this was definitely a lengthy process. A month later, a jury is finally selected for this case. Although a jury was selected, the case was put on hold because the judge went to go ahead and review possible new evidence. July of 2023 is when the third trial officially began. In August of 2023, the attorneys go on ahead and have their closing arguments. On Tuesday, August 15th, 2023, an anonymous verdict was finally reached. Now, before we left off in part 1, I went ahead and spoke about Kiera, which is AJ's sister, taking the stand. The other people that had took the stand was his 2 coaches and the family friend who received that weird note. And although part 1 was like 50 minutes long, I am not making part 2 as long as the first video. In this video, I am just going to be covering the end of the trial and what really led the prosecutors to nail AJ for this case. Okay, so during the second trial, they come back from lunch and the 2 coaches take the stand. Stephen Hill had been the first of the 2 coaches to speak, and he had been the coach from Kincaid. And if you remember, Kincaid was the school that AJ was kicked out of. Now, Mr. Hill was actually the prosecutor's witness, and when asked about the relationship between AJ and his parents, Mr. Hill testified that AJ seemed to be pretty close with his father. He states that they had a quote-unquote good relationship, and he also stated that his dad was always pushing AJ to be the best that he could be. When the coach was asked about the relationship between AJ and his mom, he stated that Mrs. Armstrong was more harder on AJ than Antonio Sr. was. Mr. Hill also stated that when AJ had been failing out of Kincaid, he wanted to go to another school. He recalled when he spoke with his parents that Mrs. Armstrong was very angry. Her exact words to him were, according to the coach, "I'm not paying another dime to send this liar to private school when we can send him to Lamar." So I just wanted to go ahead and correct some things I stated earlier that was a bit incorrect. Coach Hill had actually been the head coach at St. Pius, but previously coached at Kincaid. He was also actually the second coach to take the stand, so I just wanted to correct myself with that. The first coach to actually take the stand was Thaddeus Regans, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. When AJ was a sophomore in 2016, Regans had been the head coach. He states that AJ was set to play at Lamar that year after leaving Kincaid, but AJ never began school that fall. He also testified that he never saw AJ angry or frustrated with his parents. He even adds that at practices, AJ was very respectful to Mr. Armstrong. Coach Regans told jurors that he knew AJ's father from childhood, growing up in Houston and playing at rival high schools. He also let jurors know that he didn't even know the real reason for AJ's transfer to Lamar. The prosecution pointed out that AJ's parents spoke about sending him to another private elite school, which happened to be St. Pius. Coach testified that he didn't even know AJ's mom was the one who stopped that plan. Now moving on to the next person who took the stand, Maxine Adams. So Maxine went ahead and took the stand before the case even saw a jury. AJ's defense felt as though the prosecutors withheld Mrs. Adams' information. So she brought up that allegedly, according to her, Antonio Sr. was involved in a prostitution ring. She also states that he had been receiving death threats and even attempted to change his life insurance policy before he was killed. Now, according to Adams, and this is also according to an article from ABC 13, she states that in December of 2016, she brought this info to police. Adams also testifies that she hired a PI to look into weird feelings she had about her ex-husband. So Maxine's ex-husband's name was actually Cecile Adams, and he was a close friend of Armstrong, allegedly. According to Adams, based on phone records and bank records, she says that she discovered several numbers and burner phones that were passed around in order to summon women for services. The attorneys had an issue though. Adams couldn't remember some specific details. DeToto says that the prosecutor sat on this for 18 months, and he felt had they acted on it at that moment it was given, she would remember the details and AJ would have a fair trial. Adams believed that this was a strong connection to the Armstrong death. Now, Adams didn't remember the name of the private investigator she hired. She also could not recall who told her about the death threats to Antonio Sr. She also could not provide further details about Antonio Sr. changing his insurance policy. The Harris County District Attorney Office only provided the defense with audio records of Adams' first interview, along with 50,000 pages of phone records, allegedly, according to Chronicle records. Now, this was a requirement where officials had to turn over to criminal suspects any information that will help with their defense. The statement by Maxine would mean that AJ had nothing to do with his father and his mother's death, and it would also back up AJ's alleged claims of there being someone else in the home that night. AJ's defense wanted this to be the reason why his case was dismissed and thrown out completely. Because the prosecution sat on what Miss Adams had said, AJ's defense felt that this quote-unquote compromised their ability to investigate this information, as well as go ahead and prepare an adequate defense. Defense attorney DeToto states, "We are learning that there was stuff available to us back in December of 2016 that is no longer available to us. So in our minds, that has caused harm to this young man, and we don't believe he can get a fair trial." He later adds that the reason the audio is so important is because she's very specific about the ring. She gives phone numbers, names, bank accounts, and all. Defense attorney Chris Collinsworth states that he is flabbergasted, very shocked at this audio file and the contents in it. Harris County DA's office maintains that more time, this was the answer to a potential pre-trial Brady violation, not an outright dismissal like the defense wanted, according to CW39 Houston's article. Jay did not take the stand in his own defense. He did become inconsolable when photos of his parents were being shown in court. Another witness to take the stand had been Josh's ex-girlfriend. Hannah Pillon was very emotional during her testimony. She stated that she lived in the same complex as Josh and they were inextricable. Hannah states that Josh was, quote, the most loving and caring person she knew. She said that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him, and he was everything to me, she stated. The night of the murder of the Armstrongs, Hannah states she and Josh was together. Josh's cousin Trenton had also been in attendance. She said they were playing video games and then she went off to bed. Describes Josh's demeanor as frantic, scared, and worried when he woke her up. She states that he shook her awake, and when she had initially woke up, she was confused at first. Hannah says that Josh said, "Babe, wake up, someone is in the house." She says that he grabbed the shotgun from the closet and ran to his parents' home with his cousin. Hannah said that shortly after, she called the police. She states that when Josh got back, he had been devastated. She stated that he looked sad and his face was puffy. Hannah stated that anyone could tell he had been crying. She said that he just wanted to go to sleep, and she tried to comfort him the best that she could. Hannah says after that incident, Josh completely changed. The prosecutor, John Jordan, asked Hannah if Josh had showed any signs of mental illness prior to the murders. At that point, they had dated for about a year. She states, "No, and I want to be very, very clear about this. Josh was never like this before." Hannah states that this completely ruined his life. She said that she noticed the changes in him 3 weeks to a month after and was paranoid. Hannah said that she and Josh had to leave Texas. She wasn't allowed to communicate with anyone or tell them where she had been. She said that he developed a list of people who were potential suspects. Everyone had been on the list, she said, including herself. She testified that she told Josh, "I was there with you. There was no way I could have done it." He also testifies that the note left at the Armstrong home had played a big role in why he was scared. He states, and quote, "It took over his entire life." Hannah goes on to tell the court that she and Josh migrated to Colorado for about 3 weeks, but they had to come back due to Hannah starting a new job. She also testifies that they broke up a year after the incident. Hannah begins crying when prosecutors show photos of Josh with his mother. Although they broke up, Hannah and Josh stayed together. Hannah states that Josh basically didn't want to do anything. He stopped doing everything altogether at that point. Said that he was overly fixated on trying to figure out who killed his parents. She also testified that Josh never laid a hand on her, nor did he ever threaten her. Hannah states that his paranoia did get worse every day, and she simply could not do it anymore. In September of 2016, Josh, according to Coup.com article, had an initial visit to the Bentube Hospital. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The prosecutor, Mr. Jordan, went on to read the medical report on him. It stated, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, suicidal due to his parents' death. Second bullet point, no prior psychiatric history. Third bullet point, came to hospital voluntarily at the urging of his grandparents. Fourth bullet point, patient does not believe his younger brother committed this crime, but unsure of who did it. The fifth bullet point states that Josh's best friend and roommate from College Station passed away. After that, the sixth bullet point shows that Josh actually began self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. In the seventh bullet point, it states that Josh had actually been reading something called The Pearl and even became somehow convinced that his cousin Trenton was the one who committed the crime, even though, if you guys remember, they had been together the entire night that his parents passed away. Later on, Trenton passed away as well. The eighth bullet point states that he becomes tearful at the memory of his mother telling him at 13 Antonio Sr. was not his biological father. And the last bullet point talks about his parents' death being the most distressing, traumatic event. So a cross-examination is done where defense attorney DeToto tells Hannah that she can't be so sure Josh never left or stayed throughout the night because she had been asleep all night before and after the murders. To that, Pylon responds that had he left, the dogs would have made a noise and woke her up. Carmen Rowe, who is KHOU 11's legal analyst, states that she thinks having an alternate suspect out there in a case where you're going to hang your hat on reasonable doubt is something that you see in a lot of courtrooms across Harris County. Mrs. Rowe also goes on to say, I think it's a tactic that's been successful in the past, and so I think they're using it again. In the third trial, video of the burglars in Antonio Sr.'s gym was excluded from evidence. The new DNA evidence that caused the trial to be delayed, which had been found by investigator Celestina Rossi. AJ had went on to file a lawsuit against the city of Houston as jurors deliberated their fate in his third trial. Now, he had been suing the city of Houston for allegedly violating his civil rights. He believed one or more people inside the HPD planted his father's blood particle on his t-shirt that had been given for evidence. An attorney stated, who hadn't been on this case, that it had been too big of a coincidence. He also felt as if there must have been some intent behind it. Armstrong's defense team questioned the presence of blood on Armstrong's clothing during the 7th day of his trial. So let's just go ahead and get into the presence of the blood found. So Ms. Rossi, whom is a blood splatter and crime reconstruction expert, testified that on June 2nd, 2023, she discovered the blood. This was days before Armstrong's trial was scheduled to start. She states that when she went to HPD's property to view the pillows collected from the Armstrong's bed, she found it. Now, Rossi explains to the jury that when she was given the list of all Armstrong's evidence while in the property room of the police station, she noticed his t-shirt, pants, and sandals had all been collected. Rossi states that when she went on to lay out the items on his gray shirt, she, and I quote, states, I immediately saw what appeared to be an almost reddish brown stain touching the bottom of the police sticker. The stain was then taken for further testing. Courtney Hurd, who had been with the Forensic Science Center, confirmed that the blood found had most likely been from Antonio Sr. Rossi testified that when she received the shirt, part of the police name tag appeared to be peeling, revealing the first stain. She conceded on the stand that the stain could be from cross-contamination. In the lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern Division of Texas, the gray shirt AJ had been wearing at the time of the murders were tested by Houston Forensic Science Center, and no DNA was found. Additionally, the suit stated officers testified no blood was found on AJ when he was arrested. It further alleges that the, quote, human action after the shirt was taken from AJ caused his father's blood particle to be there. The lawsuit doesn't mention at all a specific amount the Armstrong team had been seeking, and none of the attorneys that fought for him during his murder trial represented him during this. Instead, Houston attorney Randall Kalin is the one that is on his civil case. A communications director named Mary Benton, who works for the mayor Sylvester Turner's office, told ABC 13 that she was unsure whether the city had been officially notified about this lawsuit. She states, once we receive details, the city will respond in court and not in the media. So I just now want to go ahead and move on to the wife's statements that she made on the stand. AJ's girlfriend turned wife, Kay Ober, takes the stand, and for 4.5 years, she had an on and off relationship with AJ. Ever since the murders of the Armstrongs, who would have been her parents-in-law, Kay expresses how devastated she was after. She stated that she began having to take anti-anxiety medication. According to Ober, Josh, who was Armstrong's older brother, stayed at the family's home 2 to 3 weeks before the murders. The brothers stayed in a third-floor bedroom. She never recalled seeing any issues between AJ and his parents, stating, according to her, their relationship was really good. On the day of the murders, she told the defense attorneys that AJ seemed like his normal and, quote, happy, goofy self when they had been texting. She was then asked about a conversation they had over a rumor at school, and she recalls him getting advice from his father, Antonio Sr. She states that they even spoke around 9 p.m., only a couple hours before the incident. During the cross-examination, prosecutors were trying to paint a picture of AJ's deception, and it said that Kate had been pretty confident and okay up until this point. She was also asked whether she knew about the issues AJ had with his parents,
Anytime she couldn't remember something, the state would bring up past messages between her and AJ. The prosecutors pointed out that in an exchange with Ober and Armstrong, Ober had been upset that AJ had been smoking too much Mary Jane and also selling it. In another exchange between the two, while AJ had been locked up in juvenile holding, Kate had been really upset that he lied to her about the real reason he was kicked out of Kincaid. She states, "I feel like you lied to me all the time." One of AJ's defense attorneys, Rick DiToto, states that we wanted the jury to hear from someone who was with AJ right up until the murders occurred and who had a relationship with AJ for weeks before that. There were a lot of talks about all these texts. They are 16-year-old kids flirting with each other. He also states, once again, it's an attempt by the prosecution to come up with a motive, and there is not one. So Oakes and Ober had been the fourth and fifth witnesses from the defense team. Kate's testimony had been 2 hours long. Her testimony also showed Armstrong, who at the time was 19 years old, as someone who constantly lied to his loved ones. Now, when AJ was kicked out of Kincaid, he told Ober it was due to football, which we know that it was a lie. The conversation AJ allegedly had with another friend was also brought up while Kate was on stand. It was said that AJ stated to this friend that he only needed Ober around for the trial. At the end of her testimony, Ober states that their relationship wasn't perfect. She said, "It was like any other teenage couple." She stated that we fight sometimes, we're growing up, we are learning, we're becoming people, our relationship is happy and good. So, you guys, let's just talk about what led jurors to actually convict AJ. Now, it only took 10 hours in the third and final trial to find AJ guilty. His wife was obviously sad and crying. She even mouthed something to him while he had been taken out in handcuffs. It was said that the jury worked through the evidence and they also made something called flowcharts. It had been the 911 calls, the interrogation tapes, the test fires, and also him trying to set his parents' carpet on fire with his parents still in the home that led them to convict him. It in fact had nothing to do with the blood found that actually delayed the trial for some time. His defense states that they will definitely be appealing. It was also said by several news outlets that it had been a very emotional day, which I'm sure it was, for AJ's family, the defense, the jurors, and just everyone included. His defense team states that it was a difficult process. Twice they managed to get a hung jury, but this time they absolutely lost their client.
Tears
his
in their
family
eyes,
especially
his wife
walked out emotionally.
Visibly emotional.
Now we are going to just move on to an interview that AJ had, and I am also going to be inserting clips from it as well.
To have this result after 7 years is a tough pill to swallow, but we will not ever stop fighting for AJ. I've said this many times. We'll be here always for him, and his family is as strong as they could be, and they will not stop fighting for AJ. They will continue through an appeal and whatever comes after that.
Now, this interview had been done between AJ and ABC 13 Houston. The interviewer, Courtney Fisher, was the one who spoke with him, and she goes behind the scenes of the interview in one video, stating that she consistently expressed to AJ that she wasn't on anyone's side. She just wanted to get the truth out, the actual story, and she knew that part of the story was AJ's version. September 12, 2018 is when he broke his silence. AJ's attorney told her she couldn't ask what actually happened inside the house. They had still been in the middle of the trial during this interview, and that is why she could not ask any questions about it. Courtney also states that she had a hard time looking into his eyes and not being able to ask questions about it. She was also scared he could walk out any minute. She states in the beginning he was very protective, and then she watched him open up a little bit. Courtney Fisher had stayed at most of his trials, and she felt as if it was her responsibility to do so. She says that she actually had to build the relationship and learn the ins and outs of this case. During the interview, he was asked if he did it, and he replied, "No, never, never." AJ states that it hurt and frustrated him that people felt as if he killed his parents. AJ says that the accusations bothered him before, but now he knows that he cannot control how people perceive him. Courtney asked him to bring her back to the moments in court and how he felt at that time. He states that it made him emotional, seeing the pictures and the texts, and just put him back in those moments, and he actually broke down at this time.
Went through your mind?
I mean, it's just seeing pictures of my parents again, just sitting there and rereading text messages. I just put myself back in that situation, and I just reimagine just having those conversations with my parents, whether I was getting yelled at or whether I was doing something good. Like, just to have that again, just 5 minutes, if that's what it was, just to have that again with my mom, my dad, that's all I want.
AJ also expresses how seeing his sister on the stand was very painful and that she went through so much at such a young age. He states that it was frustrating hearing that his case went to mistrial, stating he was adamant that it was going to be done and be it for him. AJ states that having the opposite happen to him hurt him. He was comforted by his grandma at the time, who simply explained to him that it could have been worse. They could have taken him to jail, but he was able to fight another day. When asked by the interviewer how he plans on handling court this time again, AJ states,
with the same group of support, same great attorneys, same way we did it the first time, together.
AJ is then asked by the interviewer, what if you don't get the outcome that you're looking for? In so many words, AJ states that he refuses to think about that. Now, this interview was done in the beginning of AJ's trial, so we were really able to see the difference between AJ and his attorney's demeanor throughout this case. His lawyer, Di Toto, states that there were a lot of things in the first trial that weren't allowed, and also new evidence brought up in the second trial, stating that the second trial had been longer because of that. The interviewer then goes on to ask why they hadn't put AJ on the stand, and they replied to that stating that he had already gave his statement into the police, and also during his interrogation. He also says that it would be difficult for a 16-17-year-old AJ to go against the prosecutors. Keep in mind, these are trained professionals. These are people who eat, sleep, and breathe trying to get people put away. So it was just, they felt in the best interest for AJ to not go on stand. The DA's office actually did not want to be seen on camera, but they did went out and put a statement. And this statement read, Antonio Armstrong Jr. murdered 2 of our citizens of our country, and we will fight to get justice. Now, before closing off this video, I just want to go ahead and talk about the appeal that AJ filed himself. So from what I know, the lawyers that actually fought with AJ 3 times throughout this case will not be going ahead and fighting with him this time for the appeal. I am not sure why, and at the moment I am not sure who will be fighting for him, but when I find out, I will be putting it just right here. This new attorney will have to prove that there was some significant legal error. Now, I am not too sure how he will do that, but as updates occur, I will be updating and making videos on that for you guys. So, according to Fox 2 Houston, AJ's uncle, who is also a former NFL player, he had now been defending his nephew, AJ Armstrong. He had been going around asking his NFL peers if they can go ahead and help him raise money so AJ can get a new attorney. So I mentioned earlier that I did not know the new attorney's name, and upon research, I did go ahead and find out. So Pat McCain is who is now defending AJ, and this time around, AJ was appealing his sentence and trying to get a new trial. McCain states that at this time, AJ is very optimistic and truthful, basically just trying to stay positive as much as he can. He states that he feels like if AJ could speak out at this time, he would like to thank his family for all their support and also the lawyers prior to himself. Now, according to KHOU 11, AJ Armstrong could not afford an attorney, so the judge appointed him one at that time. This judge being Pat McCain. His wife, of course, at this time was very distraught physically, and on video you can see her being comforted by her mother. So I am going to go ahead and just quickly sum up this article for you guys. So on November 10th, 2023, so just not that long ago, it states that McCain states on October 30th had marked the 75th day that AJ had been sentenced, which meant that his motion for a new trial had been overruled by operation of law. Now, these statements come from the article from Click2 Houston if you guys want to check it out. Now, Attorney McCain goes on to say that he is very disappointed for his client, AJ. He's really upset that he didn't get another hearing, which obviously would have been a second chance for AJ.
He states, however, and I quote, "I am hopeful that the courts of appeal remand or at least gives us a relief that A.J. Armstrong Jr. merits." He goes on to state, and I quote, "I know this is very disappointing for his family, but this is part of the process. We have to have some faith in the system." And by system, he means the Texas appeal process. Now, this comes after AJ, who currently is serving a life sentence in prison, appealed his guilty conviction and hired Mr. McCain. He had up until September 15 of this year to file, which he went on and did. As we know, according to the Texas appeals, if a trial court judge has not signed order granting or denying for a new motion for a new trial within 75 days of the date that the final judgment had been served, the motion is generally overruled by the operation of law, as I stated before. Now, if a new motion was to be filed, but the judge does not sign an order granting nor denying for a new trial, the trial court judge's last day preliminary power is generally the 105th day after the judgment was signed. Now, the preliminary power, if you don't know, is the period of time in which the trial court judge still has jurisdiction to modify or vacate his or her final judgment. At this time, AJ is currently being housed at the Birds unit in Huntsville. This is where his processing happens, but not where he will be serving out his full sentence. And this is just where he will be until he gets his permanent housing. And that was pretty much everything on this case. If there's any other updates, I will definitely be making a video on them. And as always, make sure to stay respectful in the comments, and also please keep an open mind. Go ahead and just express your thoughts also in the comments, but just stay respectful. We don't know who is watching, if the family is watching, and if you guys have any unsolved or solved cases that you want me to cover, you can contact me at the email in the description box below, or you can contact me on any of my social medias. So until next time, sayonara.
You to pick back up those visions and those dreams that you once had.